Good evening. Okay, we're in Aspen, and so it has to be a better evening than that. Good evening. Good evening. There we go. Thank you all for coming out this evening. We have a wonderful evening for you. Before we begin, I want to say thank you to the folks at the Aspen Ideas Festival for allowing us to do the first ever theatrical reading of the Race Card Project here in Aspen. I want to thank AFT for helping to make this possible. I want to thank the team that allowed us to do this, and let's give a big thank you to Belly Up for making such a comfortable space for us. You are in for a very special evening tonight. You're going to hear a conversation about race unlike anything you've probably heard. I run something called the Race Card Project. For the last 4 years, I have been asking people to share their thoughts on race and cultural identity in just 6 words. I did it because I wrote a family memoir, and it was about my family's very complex racial legacy. And I knew when I went out to talk about that book, I would be asking people to engage in a conversation about race. And I thought, race, it's that thing that sometimes is so difficult to talk about. How am I going to make it easier? So I decided to quite literally play the race card, to ask people to think about their thoughts on race and cultural identity and to share it with me in only 6 words. I had no idea how people would respond. Well, 4 years later, my inbox has been filled with tens of thousands of these stories. They have come from every state in this country. They've come from 62 other countries, with people all expressing their stories, their thoughts, their trials, their laments, their history, their memories, their desires, their truths, all expressed in 6 words. So what you're hearing tonight are 6-word stories. They're not our words. We have a wonderful ensemble here this evening, and they're going to make these stories come alive for you. They're not our words. They are words that were sent to us by other people. They were sent using their thumbs sometimes, typing out those words via Twitter or Facebook. Sometimes they were sent on postcards, because when I say I decided to quite literally play the race card, I actually created postcards doing my bit to keep the post office alive. My parents were postal workers, so what can I say? Many of the cards were literally sent in on postcards, and many of them were sent in with people sitting at the glow of a computer screen, speaking their 6-word truth. What you're going to hear tonight is that conversation about race that you know is out there, but you don't generally get a chance to hear it. Private conversations, very private conversations that we're giving voice to this evening. The conversation about race that you think is out there, that takes place in bodegas and locker rooms and strip malls and kitchen tables, this is perhaps what it sounds like. It matters, like it or not.
Much ado about nothing.
Race does not exist by itself.
Race is everything, but it's nothing.
Today's soft segregation harms everyone.
Black wears me wherever I go.
Does not define who I am.
Admit to unconscious racial bias.
Stereotype is a shackle. Broke mine.
I'm allowed to wear a hoodie.
A turban doesn't mean a terrorist.
Suit, degree, still afraid of me.
I am fortunate to be Caucasian.
Step on backs to race yourself.
Still working harder than others are.
The point of it all, power.
Get your feet off our necks.
Blacks complain constantly despite obvious progress.
But I voted for Barack Obama.
Colors run together. Why can't people?
I hear my grandfather's hateful words.
Think Dr. Seuss and the Sneetches.
Pay no attention to my packaging.
I am still not from Vietnam.
Please stop saying I am articulate
Do all white articulate people impress you?
Diversity doesn't count if it's white.
We aren't all strong black women.
I assume black women hate me.
Well,
Sometimes racism is actually self-imposed.
No, I am not on scholarship.
I look white. I'm also Japanese.
Gay is not the new black.
Mexican American, but no hablo español.
So I'm an alien, apparently.
When we outnumber you, you'll see.
Brown is a state of mind.
My color does not define me.
I'm never asked about hot sauce.
presumed understanding is worse than ignorance.
Pride or crutch? You decide now.
Not Chinese? You must be Japanese.
Loving my butt and hair. Impossible.
So could you rap for us?
Ain't nobody got time for that.
My great-great-grandfather owned slaves.
Sugar's will. $500 an acre, $1,500 a slave.
No one owned slaves. They owned people.
White. Do I need to apologize?
To forgive is not in me.
I am more than my ancestors' mistakes.
Easy to assume I am guilty.
Terrified you assume I'm judging you.
The hardest jails to escape are gateless.
Question. Would MLK support gay rights?
Only bigots believe prejudice is universal.
Where do you really come from?
Always putting people at ease.
Really? But you don't look Mexican.
You don't have to whisper.
Not all Mexicans can do landscaping.
Not illegal. Human and deserving compassion.
I feel uncomfortable with you here.
Stop blaming whites. Stop committing crimes.
Blame for what my ancestors did.
Please, Hispanic is not a race.
Gay, but at least I'm white.
I am white. Soon a minority.
Not what you think I am.
White as snow, but Lebanese inside.
Seen as black only by Americans.
Small town doesn't equate small mind.
America, why do you hate me?
Confederate flag, not about Southern pride.
White does not say enough about me.
No, really, I'm from Iowa.
The only Jew on Easter Sunday.
Aren't we all just fragile people?
Being comfortable is my unearned luxury.
I'm fine. Race is your problem.
We preached integration. We got segregation.
You're Mexican? But we're so similar.
Mexican men tend to frighten me.
Miss, your white girl is showing.
Haitian does not equal African American.
Indo-Pac American. Sounds like camping gear.
People, this isn't your grandfather's racism.
No, I did not steal that.
Only racist when I'm at Walmart.
Never eat fried chicken in public.
They need to help themselves first.
Mommy, why can't we play together?
A terrible, unnecessary barrier against love.
Quit blaming me because I'm white.
Let's all hit the reset button.
Dark child in my lap glares.
Born colored, children African American. Progress?
Can I love who I want?
Reason I ended a sweet relationship.
I will not ruin your bloodline.
New boyfriend visited. Nana called police.
Korean marries Italian in Chinese garden.
Obama is mixed, black and white.
If Obama's only black, everyone loses.
No one word can describe me.
The hybrids shall inherit the earth.
My race? Check one. Not possible.
My son's not half. He's double.
Don't tell me what I am.
Skin's my cover, not my story.
Hold my hand. Cancer doesn't discriminate.
A cancer being treated with aspirin.
I was taught fear of others.
Race is a fear of unknown.
I'm glad they fear me.
Race doesn't scare me, clothes do.
Minority obsession and majority guilt trap.
Stop seeing my son as a predator.
Am I failing my Latino son?
Lunch? Shh. Wait till he's gone.
Did my southern grandpa attend lynchings?
I'm black and racist against blacks.
Try to see it through my Asian eyes.
I'm a girl, not a fantasy.
To you, always the exotic other.
I'm more than just white.
Puerto Rican. But everybody thinks I'm Mexican.
I am Polish, not a joke.
Don't just tolerate me, accept me.
Race, a weapon of mass distraction.
I am more than you recognize.
I bet they're good at math.
Chinese daughter made me see white.
Japanese, Chinese, Korean, all are different.
I'm only Asian when it's convenient.
White, not all allowed to be proud.
What do you mean, you people?
I am not like the rest.
I am not like my parents.
Parents are Mexican. I am American.
I really like a black guy.
Hi. You must be the nanny?
No, I am not the nanny.
Love black nanny more than mom.
Yes, I really am her mom.
Cute baby, where is she from?
My grandchildren won't look like me.
Is Jewish a religion or a race?
I don't see you as Muslim.
God knew what he was doing.
Now, do you make your own tortillas?
Respect runs in a circular motion.
My natural hair isn't a statement.
There's nothing wrong with my hair.
Got tired of straightening my hair.
My hair is not like yours.
Red hair gets the most stares.
Ginger is not a racial category.
You're Jewish. You don't look Jewish.
I'm white, you're not, so what?
I am a conservative, not a racist.
I feel guilty for my
You
privilege.
don't know what I believe.
Why are you so afraid of me?
Ooh, can I touch your hair?
Just a German, never a Nazi.
But you're not black.
I'm light-skinned. My black is harder.
We don't match. We're family.
Heritage. Wait a second, I'm getting it wrong. Okay.
Rootless adopted child. No nationality here.
She's nothing but poor white trash.
Grandma sent me $100 when we broke up.
So much depends on so little.
Black kid in my math class?
People can hear the unspoken words.
Just stop making everything about race.
Repeating proper pronunciation hurts my feelings.
Can't pronounce my name? Try harder.
Born in America, I am American.
Don't glance at coins on sidewalks.
You can't say that anymore, Grandma.
Wouldn't have been white 100 years ago.
As American as rice and beans.
Their war is now our battle.
You're going to prom with him?
The pain never goes away. Ever.
Successful, black, gay, a family's shame.
I hate these walls between us.
You're pretty for a dark-skinned girl.
Black babies cost less to adopt.
His parents will never meet me.
I worked hard to get here.
Disagreeing with Obama makes me racist.
It's only fair if I win.
Why must our differences be wrong?
Why are Americans obsessed with race?
This old wound will never heal.
Fat black women are people too.
Girl gotta, you know, about the blues.
You love God, but not me?
White? Automatic scholarships for me?
I don't care. He can pitch.
You can't afford to buy this.
You feel superior, but you're not.
I am the new mocked minority.
Why'd you invite the white guy?
And you wonder why I'm mad?
Worry I will say the wrong thing.
Native Americans voiceless in race conversation.
You've got to be carefully taught.
Gotta stop thinking this way.
Sometimes stereotypes are true. Face it.
Hated for being a white cop.
He shot at us, but missed.
A smoldering volcano with periodic eruption.
My invisible knapsack sure is heavy.
Still the elephant in the room.
What a tangled web we wove.
Progressives always gloss over the truth.
Conservatives distort truth to protect America.
Spoke truth, but burned at the stake.
The house I did not build.
Quick to judge, slow to understand.
Raised by racists in denial.
White people do not own racism.
Racism is a flesh-colored Band-Aid.
Race and racism, not the same.
I'm not racist, I'm just aware.
What if the world were colorblind?
I don't see color is cringeworthy.
Number 1, don't talk about White Club.
Was he dot Indian or feather Indian?
Native. No one knows I'm passing.
You talk like a white boy.
Does my voice count at all?
You are dirt, so I scrubbed.
I avoid people who are different.
Not all Jewish people are cheap.
Since when am I a racist?
You're here because of affirmative action.
Why do I feel so guilty?
We
joke, but it is not funny.
Let the past be the past.
Start with kids and mix well.
Skin color is God's gift wrapping.
Can't we all just get along?
6 words will never be enough.
Still waiting for a post-racial society.
Our untold stories keep us separate.
Do the blind see things differently?
Ignore the cover. Read the book.
My only cousins, pen pals in secret.
I was taught they smell bad.
Feigning diversity is like having none.
Good morning. But there's no response.
Apartment available. Show up. No more.
Study harder, improve yourself, stop whining.
Grandmother ate in the kitchen with housekeeper.
My mother boiled the girls' utensils.
Female, Hispanic, PhD. Why so surprised?
Want to forget. Need to remember.
The anger is legitimate. I'm trying.
Reverse discrimination against whites solves nothing.
George Zimmerman is someone's son too.
So scared that Zimmerman was Jewish.
I think we are going backwards.
Failed to befriend first black student.
Black friend ditched me under pressure.
Spoke about King, classmates shunned me.
She's just not the right fit.
Sorry, we'll need a photo ID.
Finally, I learned to accept myself.
Are you black, Asian, or normal?
How'd your baby get red hair?
White guy, black church, met wife.
Racist old men are still family.
A Mississippi secret, not accidental drowning.
A child knows when injustice exists.
I am American. Stop insisting otherwise.
Biracial by birth, black by choice.
I'm not white. I'm pinkish beige.
Map of Ireland on your face.
I'm white. Boss, doctor, president, black.
Not all of us hurt you.
This is an English-speaking country.
I, society's menace, or vice versa?
Endless fuss, all beyond our control.
The get into jail free card.
The preserving of identity after genocide.
Go back to your own country.
Afraid children won't look like me.
Asians fail meeting ridiculously high standards.
American doesn't see Iranian as white.
At night, everybody is black.
Nobody's a racist, yet racism exists.
10 breeds of chicken, 1 house.
Checked cosmic in the race box.
Total non-issue when the aliens arrive.
Underneath, we all taste like chicken.
There's only one race. Human race.
One race matters, the human race.
Human DNA is 99% the same.
Blood is always the same color.
Race is forever. Prejudice is not.
Race is only in the mind.
Race, America, deep scars, tall fences.
Not real, still messes with us.
Race made up. History very real.
So these are the race card players doing a version of something we call Say What. They came together for the first time today. So they did not have a lot of time to practice.
Thank you.
I know, it's pretty amazing, isn't it? Gwen, if you could grab...
I'm sorry.
He's allowed to wear a hoodie. Gwen, if you could grab that microphone.
Okay.
It's pretty cool being... Gwen is my best friend, so it's pretty cool being
So she
up
can
on
order me
stage.
around.
Well, you know, friendship is a big elastic term. Yes. So we're going to introduce the race card players, and I'm going to begin over here.
Tessie Guillermo from San Francisco.
Mark Oppenheimer from New Haven, Connecticut.
Ann Mosley, Washington, D.C.
Anand Girdadas from Brooklyn.
Anne-Marie Slaughter, Princeton, New Jersey.
Michele Norris, Washington, D.C.
Gwen Eiffel, Washington, D.C.
Eric Motley, Washington, D.C.
Jeffrey Goldberg, Washington, D.C.
Eric Kuhn, I'd rather live in Aspen.
Angelica Hernandez, Phoenix, Arizona.
Thank you. So since they came together for the first time and had to get their mouths and their minds around these words, we're going to hear a little bit from the cast first, and then we're going to open it up for questions. This is only the third time we've done this. We had 2 cold readings beforehand, and it's something to read these. If you go to the website, you can read these. There's the racecardproject.com as a website. You receive playbills this evening, you can read them. It's something else to speak someone's truth. And often when people send in their 6-word essays, they're giving voice to something that they thought, but that they've never said out loud. So I just want to ask you, was there 1 or 2 of these that were really hard to say?
Sure, in rehearsal, I got the one about, what was the one about the blues? Girl, what do you know about the blues? And it's impossible to say without slipping into black womanese. And, I haven't ancestrally earned black womanese. So that was uncomfortable, but I didn't get that one until...
We'll give you a day pass.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Okay. Here, someone else is gonna talk now. Anand.
I've always wanted to follow your use of black womanese. I think I was just going through the script a little bit today on an iPad in my hotel room by myself and just reading them in my head. And then I thought, this is not going to be very useful. I should say them out loud to get into it. And just reading some of them out loud by myself in my own hotel room, I felt discomfort. And that's what I think is so powerful about the project.
There were 2 in particular for me. During rehearsal, my reciting The Only Jew on Easter Sunday, that was very uncomfortable for me. And being from the South, Confederate flag not about Southern pride. Wonderfully disturbing.
I actually like the one about stereotypes because it actually is one of those things that's true. We don't like stereotypes, but it is true that most black people I know like watermelon. So it's not the actual stereotype, it's the intent with which the stereotype is applied which makes us uncomfortable.
When everyone likes watermelon.
Well, that's true.
I prefer cantaloupe, Gwen. Cantaloupe.
Actually, cantaloupe over here.
So I, in the first run through, everybody agreed I got the most of the racist statements. I don't know what it was. I mean, I got white. Do I need to apologize? I got the one about, study harder, improve yourselves, stop whining. And it was really uncomfortable to have to inhabit that skin. Even though I was just reading them, I got enough of them that if you all had heard that, or if you'd seen this on YouTube without the opening, that would have been me, and that was really uncomfortable.
So, Henry, could you imagine someone saying that in a meeting, in a group of parents, overhearing that at the Starbucks?
Never. That's what makes us so powerful is I do know that's what people are thinking, but absolutely not. These are the words we don't say.
Go ahead.
The two quick points. The first is that, unlike you, I actually wanted to play the black women because, as Gwen and Michele know, that I actually secretly want to be Mavis Staples. But the other, it's true. I'm sorry. Maybe I'm oversharing at this point. Yeah. But the interesting thing happened in rehearsal, and this I didn't realize, was that people in this group don't even know what other sensitivities are. There was a confusion about the one about don't pick up pennies. Right. I instantly knew what that was about. Other people,
why don't we tell that story?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
The 6 words are,
tell the story of that. Can you do that?
The 6 words are don't pick up coins on the sidewalk. Don't look at coins on the sidewalk. Yeah. And I asked after the first reading, is there any of the 6-word essays for which you want the background? Now, in the books that you have, many of the backstories are in there. So if you're curious, in the beginning, people would just send in 6 words as anonymous. And then they started to send in 6 words with their names. In fact, when they were anonymous, I thought Anon was a very popular name. I didn't realize. I was like, what happened? Now suddenly there's all these people named Anon. And my kids who are here had to explain to me that, no, it's anonymous. But over time... But over time, people would send in their 6 words, and then they would send in stories, and now even pictures. And so many of the stories are in the book. And so I happen to know the 6 words behind that. And it was sent in from a young woman who said her grandfather had always taught her that if you see a coin on the sidewalk, and I couldn't remember if it was heads or tails, but you flipped it around so that when the next person came upon that coin, they would be ensured to have good luck. It was a very benevolent gesture. She was out on a school trip, and she went to do this thing that her grandfather had taught her to do, and someone made a comment about Jews always being cheap. And she snatched her hand back, and suddenly that benevolent gesture felt very ugly. And so those were the 6 words. And Anne-Marie, I believe you asked the question, right?
No, somebody else, I had an answer.
Okay, you had an answer. Gwen, you asked the question. But Jeffrey, you knew.
Yeah, well, because, I mean, when I was a kid, there was a game in my schoolyard called Ben the Jew, in which people would throw coins in front of a Jewish kid and see if they could bend the Jew. I'm not pleading for sympathy, believe me. And then eventually I decided to like embrace it the way gay people embrace the queer. And I'd pick up all coins now, because like, you don't want the money, I'll take it, you know?
But there was also this wonderful moment, I think it was between Jeffrey, you and Mark, about not...
Well, I had always I didn't get it either when I saw it. But then when it was pointed out to me, I said, "Oh, well, I know a different version of that, right? I know the old anti-Semitic joke. You know, how was copper wire invented? You know, someone dropped a penny in front of 2 Jews. So you get it? You didn't know? Oh, well, now you know. So take that one home. But you know, so I knew the idea, but I actually didn't pick up on it in the script. So.
There was a moment where I think it was something about sheep. There was another moment.
Oh, the line in here about sheep, and Jeffrey. Well, Jeffrey can tell it.
What was the line?
Not all Jews are cheap.
Not all Jews are cheap.
And Jeffrey and I both immediately said, well, a lot of us.
Well, no, no. I mean, there's nothing wrong with being cheap. I mean, I made a joke about being on campus and taking 2 sandwiches just because they're free, but not even wanting to eat them. But I've seen non-Jews do it too.
You know, and then I came up with 6 words. You can say it, I cannot.
Right. And I actually thought it meant a very different thing, which shows I grew up in the South and then I lived in Chicago. What I thought it was about was the coins. Yeah, don't look at the coins, meaning when, as a white woman, you pass an African-American, a black man, and it's at night and you're scared, don't stare at the sidewalk, meet his eyes. And that's what I thought it was somebody saying, when you pass me, don't stare at the coins on the sidewalk, which is just a completely different background.
And which is amazing because there are several entries in the Race Card Project that speak to that moment too. And
another interesting, I didn't place the right inflection point when we were practicing on the ticket into jail. And you were very
the
quick.
get into jail free card instead of the get out of jail free card. He never played Monopoly. The things you learn about people.
Eric and Angelico, do you have anything to say?
The other line that we all, I think, questioned was, "I'm white, boss, doctor, president, black," and I think that raised a bunch of discussion also.
That actually I was at sea. I did a race card project presentation on a cruise. And one of the passengers sent that one, did a wonderful public radio at sea cruise. And one of the passengers sent that in. And his point was, I'm white, my boss, my doctor, my president, all black. And his sentiment was, I guess I never thought I would see that in my lifetime.
There was just one more thing. At one point during the reading, I got the, you're just here because of affirmative action. I said, well, yeah, kind of. I mean, at least in part, there's nothing wrong with that,
Yeah.
but it was a different kind of conversation.
The candor in these cards is really incredible. You know, just the 6 words and then the stories that people tell behind them. There's a phrase that we all walk past on campus if you're here for the Aspen Ideas Festival. It's a quote from Wes Moore. It's on one of those wonderful banners. And it says, we are a product of our expectations, not our environment. And where discussions about race are concerned, we are a product of our expectations because we've all been told that race is this toxic thing, that race is really difficult to talk about. And so it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. We say it's difficult to talk about, and it feels like eating our toenails. But it doesn't have to. When you give people a safe space to speak their truth, it's amazing what they'll actually say.
There was a confluence of 2 of the cards. One was, you are dirt, so I scrubbed you. And the other one is something about pretty for a dark-skinned girl. When I was young, my mom used to clean us with a stone because she thought she could rub some of the color off of us. It was really, I mean, it brought that home because we were the only non-blacks on our block, and she wanted to make sure that we weren't thought of as black.
What are you ethnically?
Filipina.
One of the things when I think I was like you when we started, I was reading on the plane, and then I was reading out loud on the plane. My seatmates kind of looked at me. I am double black. But I think, and this is actually something we do, I work at the Institute and we run a fellowship, but we actually have an exercise where different fellows have to go and hear someone else's story and then come back and be that person and tell it back. And I haven't gone through that exercise, and just the power of really having to listen to another story. And we all talked about how I don't really want to say that. Anne-Marie's like, God forbid someone tweets it. But the power of really having to sort of be someone else's voice. And one of the things that I also thought about, one of the comments that made me really uncomfortable, because I've actually heard it, was like, no, I'm not the nanny. Or is that really your baby? And that's something when I think a lot about how much we have historical pain, but we have pains that happen every day. But what are the ways to open up the conversations of understanding and sort of real-time healing or understanding? Because some of this is stuff we would never say, but some of it actually is said. And sometimes if we're there and we might not say something, are we complicit? So it just really got me thinking about sort of how I'm walking each day, and it was, you know, they're all submitting. They're all anonymous.
There was one other that really rang with me, which is the Band-Aid, the flesh-colored Band-Aid. When I was a little girl, you know, this is before we became more sophisticated about these things. We'd bring home flesh-colored Band-Aids in the house, and we were observant children. We knew what the color our flesh was, but we knew that this was telling us this is what America said was normal, and that how, therefore, made us abnormal. These are the kinds of things that you internalize as a child and then push back once you get a voice.
And in the Crayola set.
Yes, there used to be a crayon called Flesh. There was a crayon called Flesh. You know, that's one of the, sometimes I dip into the Race Card Project to do stories for Morning Edition, to research stories, to find out more. And the Band-Aid story, the research behind that is really interesting about how flesh as a color and a concept came to be, and then fast forward to 2014, well, every business, because of the changing demographics in America, every business that is involved in something that might be flesh-colored, Band-Aids, pantyhose, makeup.
Nude pantyhose,
Yeah.
yes.
Suntan, you know, I mean, they're all sort of reframing what that means now, reframing their palette to adjust to a changing America. There was a lot of laughter in the room, and laughter at moments that were interesting. Not all Mexicans can do landscaping. There was a lot of laughter behind that. But the people who wrote this didn't write from a place of laughter, right? So that's interesting also, how we, is it nervous laughter? Is it the laughter because of the, because?
Recognition.
Recognition. Or is it the fact that laughter plays a role in creating a bridge to each other? I have always thought that the most honest conversation about race in America takes place on a comedy stage. Wouldn't you agree? Where people can say things that are impolitic almost everywhere else, where you're allowed to laugh. This is a space where you're allowed to laugh at that. Whereas if you witnessed that at Walmart and you laughed, someone might jerk their head around. You don't get to laugh at that. You don't get to laugh at me. But here, this is a safe space where we can laugh at each other and maybe listen to each other as well. Anyone here want to share 6 words?
So I wrote my 6 words this morning thinking about it, and then was struck at how many others had. So my 6 words were, I come from slave owners, my responsibility. Because my great-great-great uncle was general in the Civil War, a war I grew up to call the war between the states, or the worst was the War of Northern Aggression, but the part of Virginia I was from wasn't quite that bad. But I'd taken my children back to North Carolina to see the graveyard where all my ancestors on one side, from 1791 all the way through to my grandmother, were from, with all the Confederate flags flying. And what does that mean? And I think most of us have thought, well, wait a minute, you know, and we heard that, right? I'm not responsible for my ancestors, but what makes Ta-Nehisi Coates' piece on reparations unbelievable. And if you haven't read it, you must read it. And I read it with starting like, oh, come on, we're not reparations, come on. And I came out thinking this is a conversation we needed to have. But his point was, I own the good parts, right? We all own the good parts of our ancestry. We all think that's great. We look back and we look at I grew up in Charlottesville, Thomas Jefferson's good parts, sure. You know, and if you were Jefferson's descendant, you'd claim all that. Well, then you got to own the bad parts. And so what's my responsibility?
Michelle, can I add one quick thing to that?
Sure.
If you haven't read it, I am from the Atlantic magazine, so I'm happy to advertise Ta-Nehisi's piece, but you should read this Case of Reparations. But there's something very interesting going on in the country. I think the most profound one, or certainly the most common sentiment in all of this that I've seen, is this line, but I voted for Barack Obama. Because actually, the election of Obama has in some ways set back true conversation in this country, because there are a lot of people who think that Obama's election, and maybe the fact that they even voted for Obama, means that the conversation is over. We're finished. We're done. It starts with slavery, ends with a black president. And we're not there. And this is a very, very common sentiment that you hear this all the time.
I actually think the opposite. I think the election of Barack Obama deepened the conversation. People saw it as an end point. When people were talking about post-racial America, I was like, okay, America is about to elect a black president and you think it's over? Put your seatbelts on. Think about most racial America. That's the point where the conversation would probably get interesting and perhaps more prickly. So I don't know that it ended the conversation. I think it took it to a different place. And maybe
what I'm saying is I don't think it took it for a lot of people to a helpful place, because people think, I mean, I've talked to Ta-Nehisi a lot about this in the last month, and there is a lot of, well, the story's over because we ended slavery, we got it through Jim Crow, and we've got to this magical point in American history where people will vote for a black president. So the problems that he's writing about are, you know, kind of done with. That's another kind of conversation. It's not necessarily a positive kind of conversation. And you have to do some education on that to say, look, one black president doesn't equal an end to 100 years of housing and education discrimination.
One of the things that's interesting about the project is how little Barack Obama, President Obama's name shows up in the project. If you go to the website and you search Obama or President Obama or Barack Obama, some combination of that, you don't see that many entries. So it's almost like he's both a reflection, he's a mirror and a window, that people see their own experiences or something is reflected, and people wind up writing about their own experiences. So often what you see in the Race Card Project are the little moments, the nanny question, something like that. People aren't writing about the big seismic things, with the exception of Trayvon Martin, which almost crashed the website, because a lot of people had things to say about that. But it's often about very, very personal experience.
And I think that there's a wisdom in that, actually, which is some of you may have seen at the opening a couple days ago to the festival, I think it was an Egyptian woman was quoted as saying, "We overthrew our governments to kind of change our governments, but we didn't realize what we really need to change was each other and ourselves and our way of relating to each other." And I think the kind of wisdom in this is that the problem is not just law and tax policy and big things that we individually can't control. We are all implicated in this, and good people are implicated in this too.
I submitted my race card today, and my 6 words were the only non-white in the room, because I've often found myself as the only non-white, and you know, you can feel yourself being a victim, or you can feel yourself being tokenized. But I think the important thing is to not feel victimized and to not feel tokenized, and to take that opportunity to educate people that there's a need to be more than one non-white in the room, and that I'm not that different from the rest of the people that are sitting in the table.
Can you hear me okay? Yes. Okay, while the microphone was down there, I just wanted to ask a question, because Mark, you turned to Tessie and you asked, so what is your ethnic background? One of the most common submissions to the Race Card Project is some formulation of, so where are you really from? To a lot of people, that hits their ear the wrong way. It feels like someone is trying to point out their otherness. You're quite obviously not American, so where are you from? So I wonder, for the two of you, in that moment, that was very natural. So how do you express curiosity without stepping on someone's corn?
I say Queens, and it always stops them dead. And he said very few people admit to being from Queens, so there's that.
Oh, you know, I thought you meant like Nefertiti. I did. I thought you were going all Afrocentric on us, and you meant like Jamaica Queens. Like you meant Shea Stadium Queens. Oh, okay. Yeah, the moment was fine for me, but I do, you know, I write about religion, so I'm all the time walking into people's kitchens, literally and metaphorically, and just asking them all sorts of impertinent things about what for many people is a quasi-ethnic heritage. I mean, you know, I wrote a column about how Mormons don't produce great literature because they're too cheery. And, you know, I had to get Mormons saying it. I mean, I had to quote Mormons, but, you know, the mail I got afterwards was from a lot of Mormons saying it's true. I mean, they produce a lot of young adult literature and a lot of fantasy literature, but they don't produce, I mean, I qualified in all sorts of ways, some of them too, but for a people that is so highly educated and that essentially are the Jews or the Asians, you know, if you look at them, there's that kind of socioeconomic profile. When they go into the arts, they don't do what we think of as super high-end literary fiction. And the answer that the Mormon writers gave me was, we don't do tragic sensibility, we're cheery. And, you know, and I wrote that, I got it past my editors somehow, but that's what I do. So I'm impertinent, but I don't know, how is it for you? So.
Well, context is really important. And so the context, the place, the situation in which the question is asked really dictates the answer. And so I guess I'm one of those people that are always trying to put folks at ease.
We would like to take questions from the audience. If anyone has questions about anything you heard or comments, or you want to share your 6 words.
Hi, thank you. That was very moving from all of you. And, you know, I've read about the Race Card Project before, but just hearing it was really amazing. One thing I wanted to discuss or talk about was the myth of the model minority, and this idea that a lot of, especially kids my age, Asian Americans are expected to perform really well. And in some ways, for me personally, as an Indian American, that's a source of pride when other individuals say, oh, obviously you have to be smart, you have to score well on your tests, and you have to become a doctor or an engineer. But in other ways, that means that populations of my people who don't do as well are discriminated against within their own culture, and also there's some resentment and friction between that. So I was wondering if any of you could talk about your personal experiences with that, or how to start having informed discussions on the myth of the model minority.
I can start by saying that my parents are immigrants from the West Indies, so even within the black community, and I was going to say African American, but all West Indians don't like to call themselves even African American, there's a distinction that's often drawn that immigrants from Africa or from the West Indies are hyper accomplished, and there are hyper expectations. What I think it is that immigrants in general who've made the move here in order to improve their children's lives often set very rigorous standards for their kids. And within our communities, we begin to compete with each other about that. And it's something you live with. I certainly lived with trying to make black American friends and feel like a normal person when I knew that on some level they were saying, oh, well, you're one of those. And these were people with my same skin color.
So it's so complicated. In Princeton, in the public high school, there where both our sons are, there's no question there are literally conversations among the kids of I did well, except of course for the Asian kids, meaning that's a different standard now. So on the one hand, that's racism in the sense that that is an assumption that people behave a certain way because of their skin color. It may be a positive assumption, not a negative one, but it's still racism. On the other hand, what strikes me about what you have to evaluate about it is all Claude Steele's work on priming, right? The fact that Asian American kids are expected to do well means they have more confidence they will do well. If you take a Chinese American girl and you give her a math test and you show her a picture of Chinese before she takes it, she will do better than if you show her a picture of being a girl. Because as a girl, she's not supposed to do well on math, she'll do less well. As a Chinese, as an Asian, but as Chinese, she's expected to do well. So the question is very complicated in terms of the psychology of how we actually raise expectations to give people confidence to perform.
Can I just add something to that? You mentioned Claude Steele. Yes. Well, some of the work he did with Yuri Treisman at the University of Texas is very interesting around stereotype vulnerability, yes, and trying to bridge that. And so they did some very interesting work where they put together a group of African American students and a group of Asian students, and they studied together, and then they made sure that they socialized together. But the idea was that they got to know each other, and that they learned from each other, and they picked up the stereotypes that were overlaid on both groups. And so the black students learned that the Asian students, yes, had cultural expectations, but they also studied really hard. They had study habits that were enforced on them at a really early age. The Asian students learned that the black kids had this sense of family, that they hung out together in dorms, and so there was this way that they lifted everyone up through this work, and I think that there's a model in there somewhere.
I just want to say, I think there's when thinking about, we always have this narrative of using immigrants to make points about other people in America. And I think there's kind of uses and misuses. And the misuse is sort of what you point to. One, it ignores all the poor. There's a half of Indians in New York are poor, never talked about. But the other big misuse is particularly against African Americans, but other which is if Indians, there's an implicit, if Indians can do it or Chinese can do it, like, what are you doing, right? So that's kind of the misuse. And we should be skeptical about, people comparing descendants of slaves to people who had to come, with their parents across a border to people who came from Beijing Normal University after a PhD. Those are all very different cases. But the use goes to your point about family. I think we can learn things from immigrant success that are helpful to native-born Americans, and I think particularly it has to do with family and community. That there tends to be a pattern of immigrants kind of huddling and pooling resources to help each other succeed that sometimes does not happen in native-born American communities of all colors. And so we shouldn't reject the lessons of immigrants either.
We'll try to move a little quicker so we we'll try to move quicker so we can hear from more people.
All right, I'll talk. Sorry, I won't talk so loud. So just a very quick story, if I may, and then a question, because you mentioned that you were from the Philippines. I live in Toronto. We have a strong Filipino population, the majority of whom are nannies who've come over from the Philippines. So I have a friend, she's Filipino, her husband is a white man, they have a child. And one point I said to her after a few years, I said, you are the most beautifully dressed person that I see, even if we run into each other at the grocery store. And she looked at me and she said, well, she said, Beth, after 2 or 3 years, I got really tired of being asked if I was the nanny. And so her compensation, for lack of a better word, was to be always more than necessary as far as being presentable. So anyway, just want to share that. Now, so here's, I guess, my thought or my question. Do we not do ourselves a disservice if within the group that we find ourselves, so for myself, I'm Jewish, and I can think of sitting around with friends, and if everybody at the table is Jewish, we sort of start making fun or making jokes about ourselves. So-and-so's cheap, or the wedding, everybody eats, nobody drinks. It's sort of those types of things, and then it's funny at the time, but I do think that within our own groups of people, however you define the group, that we really can do ourselves a disservice because we're perpetuating, I don't know if they're myths, but we're perpetuating these thoughts.
You can say it, but I can't, or sometimes stereotypes are true.
It doesn't bother me to have a little inter-ethnic humor, frankly. I really don't. I think that we have to be careful about calling everything racism. Making references, self-mocking, humorous, loving references to stereotype can be pretty funny. It's not so funny if those same things are said by someone else whose intent is to hurt or scar or limit you. So, yeah, I sit around at my table at Thanksgiving and we tell jokes I'm not going to tell in here tonight. Just saying. Right. And I'll deny it if anybody says they heard me say it. And you, just one. And you've heard them too. Hey, I just found out about the coins today, But that's because that's a conversation that happens someplace else. But the way that laughter is a bridge to healing, it's okay for us to laugh at ourselves. We don't have to take it so darn seriously. But we are responsible for how we apply it outside those very defined settings.
No, just a quick point. I'm a little bit more sympathetic to your point. 2 reasons. One, this stuff is corrosive. There are people in the African American community, people Jewish community, other communities, who internalize some of these stereotypes and actually begin to believe them. That's the nature of minority self-hatred. The other point is and we've seen this in comedy. And Dave Chappelle went silent. For 6 years because, and many black comedians have this, and many other ethnic comedians too, I guess, where suddenly they realize that they're making these jokes about black people, and white people are laughing, not benevolently. They're running with this stuff. And a lot of people go silent because they realize that they might be fomenting this kind of thing.
I actually, that was Jeff made part of the point I was going to make, which is, certainly within my family and extended family, there is sometimes Jewish humor, but there are really 2 kinds. And one kind is good-natured and comes from a place of love and love of ourselves. And the other kind can be very corrosive, and it can take the form of making fun of those other Jews. Well, those are the tacky Jews, or those are the tasteless Jews, or those are the, them, the Jews in that town with their bar mitzvah parties. And that's what that really is internalized self-hatred being expressed onto the other, right? And that's very corrosive, and I don't want my children hearing that. But, stuff that's either playing on stereotypes that to me feel so antiquated that it's kind of funny, or stuff that kind of puffs us up, like, well, we're smart. So, but a lot of it, what's very dicey is that a lot of it is disguised self-loathing, and I do try, and I think that's true in every community's self-humor, and you want to be careful of that piece of it.
Is this on? Yep. Hey, I was thinking about 6 words while you were speaking. And for me, and the context is I worked in Africa for many years. The 6 words are, we all descend from Africa. I spent a lot of time in Kenya. Of course, Leakey is there. And I learned a lot about Africa. I would come back, feel very connected to Africa and feel like many black friends would feel that they understood, they had more of a connection, et cetera. And I felt like I had a great connection, and oh yeah, we all, Lucy, I think, is still the first found. So we're all from Africa. So that always made me feel very good and very connected to everybody else.
So the question, a question, because there may be many, but if you were with a group of friends or you're at home for a Thanksgiving holiday and you just put that out on the table, we all descend from Africa. 5. Okay, but we'll take it anyway. And you put that out on the table, what do you think the response would be?
Truly descend from Africa.
What do you think the response would be?
Well, I come from a family who's traveled a lot.
No way, girl, get out of here.
No, well, in my family, I think it would be very, understood. My family's lived on a lot of continents, done a lot of humanitarian work, and.
But if you did it in my family, they'd go, "I'm not from Africa. What are you talking about? What does that have to do with me? Are you saying that to me just because I'm black?"
Right.
So everything can get taken a bunch of different ways. Discomfort kicks in
and
right
that goes
away.
back to your comment about context and intentionality, and how well you know the person, where you think they're coming from, right, and what the context is. To me, that's a embracing, collective, warm thought, not a negative one.
Thank you. There was a hand over here. Gentleman right here.
I was taken with the story from Silicon Valley about the party, which you said, I feel uncomfortable with you in my house. My idea, the response would be everyone else to get up and leave and say, if you're uncomfortable with her, you're uncomfortable with me too. The trouble is, if you don't think of that ahead of time, you're not going to do it.
Can I put that in context? You read the book, right? You read this is this the story that was in the playbill?
Yes, in the playbill.
Okay, so let me just pull everybody else into the story.
Okay.
The 6 words are, I feel uncomfortable with you here. It's someone who lived in Northern California. She went to a party. She went with her, I'm trying to remember, there's tens of thousands of these, so I'm amazed that I can even remember this one. But she went to a party with her child, and she was the only person of color at the party, and she was brought along by a friend. So she was not invited to the party, but she was a guest with one of the invited guests. And the homeowner was surprised to see her. It was a large party. It wasn't like a dinner party. There were several people. They were eating in the kitchen. They were eating in the dining room. They were eating all over. And the homeowner came up to her and said, I'm uncomfortable with you here. And no one stood up for her. And so she took her child and she left. And so I just wanted to bring everybody else.
I thought everyone read it. But yet, I see the answer is everyone else getting up and leaving, saying, if you're uncomfortable with her, you're uncomfortable with me because I stand up. But if you don't think of that ahead of time and make a decision that that's what you will do if you're put in that situation, there's no way you'll do it. You'll be embarrassed, you'll stay there, and you won't have made your voice heard.
Not sure how you get prepared for something like that ahead of time.
But I always wonder when the stories come in about, much like a screenplay, about the stories outside the 4 corners of the page. So I wondered if the woman who said that felt comfortable with her words when she went to bed at night. I wondered about the people who didn't say anything, because you've had those moments where you get in the shower and you have great conversations in the shower. This is what I should have said, And I wonder if people who didn't say anything were later thinking about what they should have said or what they maybe should have done. I'm going to take it all the way up to the top because there's someone who's raising his hand way, way up high who's back by the bar.
Is that better? Oh, sorry. 2 points that I'd like you to try and connect for me. Racism is prejudice plus power. And if you're born white and male in the society, it's rather disingenuous to assume that you are devoid of sexism or racism. You've just experienced privilege that you haven't seen throughout your life. And a lot of what you're talking about in this is speaking up. And what I see as the huge problem is the silence. Either the silence of people not standing up for someone that suffers the comments that you're talking about, or the silence that comes from people who don't know how to respond themselves when they hear comments made that are offensive to them. And I know the Southern Poverty Law Center has a wonderful program with Speak Up to address this. But I'm trying to figure out, how do we get really past this? Is hearing these 6-word stories enough to really move people to accept that if they're on the privileged side of power, that they cannot just assume that that's not part of their fiber? They don't want it, they don't mean it, but it's part of the air you've breathed growing up in your culture.
So can I try to take a crack? So again, I grew up in Virginia in the 60s, and people were not afraid to be overtly racist. I mean, I remember hearing a kid in my grade school class talking about how glad she was that there were no blacks in a country club because she sure wouldn't want to swim in the same pool. There's no way anybody I know would ever say anything like that today. In nowhere that I go can you voice anything remotely close to half of what is said here. So what I think is so powerful about this project is the words have been silenced, but the feelings haven't in the same way. I mean, we've made huge progress, but the feelings are still there. And if you can't name it, I mean, it's like the basic rule of therapy. If you can't name it, you can't change it. So I think being able to have this conversation is essential to moving on from where we are now.
I want to sort of connect your comment and the gentleman who just talked about the party, because I think sort of building upon sort of what's happening now with also sort of adults in privilege, I think a lot about sort of how, because very few of us have really learned the skills to have this conversation. This is why I think a project like this that is very accessible and telling sort of, starting from your own voice, because change first starts with your heart. And then it kind of moves to your head and your gut, and then it's sort of going on. But when I think about this, the story about the party in Silicon Valley, I actually talked to my children about, you might find yourself at some time in this situation. And what are you going to do? Are you going to be in a situation where you're going to stand up from someone who might be weaker, less popular, whatever, or someone who might be different? But I actually think, and anytime that you try to walk in those shoes, you also hope that hopefully you live up to what the expectations and role you should be for your children. So I don't think we can underestimate the paths, like the power we all have. But I also think to be humble that we might not all have the same skills to how to really first listen really well. So I just wanted to add that.
We could go on and on, but we're told that our time is limited, and there's a DJ that's going to be playing. So you're welcome to stay and get your groove on if you want to, but we unfortunately have to bring this part of the conversation to a close. There are a couple things I just want to say. The gentleman who asked about privilege, there's one comment about that. Privilege is one of those words that's quite common in the Race Card Project as well. But for some people, they think, well, where's my privilege? Just because I'm white, why am I automatically privileged? I can't afford to buy my son shoes. He needs them. I don't know where the rent is going to come from tomorrow. So how is it that I'm privileged? So even the words that we sort of associate with class and culture, we have to think about. I always say that the Race Card Project is a great way to start a conversation, but it's not a panacea. It's not going to automatically change things, but it will make you think about life as lived by someone else. My 6 words are still more work to be done, because there's always more work to be done. And you mentioned listening. Many of us use our voices in one way or another, as writers, as leaders, as broadcasters. And many people think that what we say is the most important thing, particularly in an age where we all have these devices in our pockets and we're always saying all kinds of things. Well, really the most important thing we do is not talk, but listen. I'm a broadcaster, but the most important thing I do is listen. And perhaps through this project, we found a way to listen to each other. We are so honored that you came here tonight to listen to us. Thank you very much. If you choose to use those devices to tweet about the evening, please use, in addition to the Aspen Ideas hashtag, the Race Card Project, or Say What hashtag. Thank you very much. See you around Aspen.